It's ironic. I can turn an empty parking lot into a dazzling gala for 1,000 guests. Yet in my own husband's family, they couldn't even find me a chair. That thought echoed in my mind as I stood in front of my mother-in-law's birthday banquet table, glowing under candlelight. Everything was perfect down to the smallest detail, except for one thing. My seat. Rome. Italy. A famous rooftop restaurant where the golden light spilled over the distant Colosseum. Tonight was supposed to be my moment of pride, a testament to my talent when I had personally orchestrated the entire week-long celebration for Mrs. Vivienne Jones's 65th birthday. And yet, that very moment turned into a carefully staged public humiliation. Nathan, my husband, chuckled softly, a flat, unfamiliar sound I never imagined I would hear from him. "Oops, I guess we must have miscounted the chairs," he said lightly, his tone laced with playful mockery, and then the entire table burst into laughter. The sound, sharp and cold, sliced straight through me like glass. I stood still, swallowing hard, hiding my trembling hands beneath the folds of my evening gown. Outwardly, I forced a fragile smile. Inside, a storm was raging. It was absurd. Really, Isabella Morgan, 35 years old, founder of Radiance Events in San Francisco, am the one luxury brands and elite corporations pay $4,200 a month just to have my magic touch on their events. I am the one who had advanced over $60,000 from my company's credit line to fund this extravagant week. And yet here I was, standing in front of them, stripped of dignity, as though I didn't belong. This wasn't the first time. For years, the Whitmore family had treated me like a shadow. Mrs. Vivienne would drape an arm around her friend's shoulders, smiling sweetly as she said, "Having Isabella in the family is convenient, like having a personal party planner at home." Her words floated out lightly, but her eyes always carried quiet disdain. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces fell into place. The early mornings when Nathan would vanish, claiming he was having breakfast with Dad. The hushed conversations in hotel hallways would fall silent the moment I walked by. The knowing glances exchanged across dinner tables, glances I had once ignored, telling myself, they just need time to accept me. And now, seated at this pristine white-clothed table in Rome, they had delivered my answer. I was never considered part of the family. I remember the icy numbness spreading through me as I walked out of that restaurant. And yet, strangely, I didn't cry. Not a single tear fell. Instead, there was an eerie silence inside me, a calm so unnatural it felt like a frozen lake resting over a rumbling volcano. I crossed the street to a small cafe, sat down, and ordered an espresso, setting the cup on the table. I gazed at the Colosseum glowing against the night sky and whispered silently to myself, "This isn't just about a missing chair. This is the death sentence for every illusion I've clung to for the past 5 years. They thought I would swallow this humiliation like I always had before they were wrong. I was no longer the timid girl desperate for their approval. I was the woman who had turned countless events into legends. And if they had chosen to cast me out, I would leave. But I would not leave quietly." As I stepped back into the hotel, the long hallway bathed in soft golden light seemed to swallow each of my footsteps. I no longer wanted to play the role of the polite daughter-in-law. I needed answers. I needed them to look me in the eye and admit the little charade they had orchestrated. In the lobby, the whole family was gathered after the dinner party, chatting animatedly as if nothing had happened. I walked toward them. My heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. Tap, tap, drawing every pair of eyes in my direction. What was that about? I started, my voice low but sharp enough to slice through the air. A 12-person dinner table, and somehow, I'm the extra Charlotte, Nathan's younger sister. Let out a dry laugh. You're overreacting. People mix up seat numbers all the time. It was just a minor oversight. I let out a bitter laugh of my own. An oversight. Then why did I hear Mrs. Vivian herself tell the restaurant manager 12 seats, not 13? Don't tell me that was just an oversight. The air froze. Mrs. Vivian adjusted the pearl necklace around her neck, her tone still sweet, but her eyes revealed a cold edge. Isabella, don't let your imagination run wild. It's my birthday. I don't want to turn it into some kind of stage drama. I met her gaze directly. I don't need to create drama. You already prepared the script perfectly. I just accidentally became the lead. Nathan stepped in, his tone soft, almost pleading. Isabella, you know how my mom is. Sometimes she can be a little rigid. Let's talk about this later. Okay, no need to make a scene here. I turned to him, anger rising. Later. For years. I've been putting it off until later. When they belittled me, you stayed silent. When they called me the free event planner, you said nothing. And tonight, when they erased my seat from the table, you laughed. Nathan, you laughed. He froze, his eyes shifting away. That silence stung more than any insult. Gregory, Nathan's older brother, chimed in with a mocking tone. Come on, Isabella, don't play the victim here. This family's given you more than enough. I shot back instantly. More than enough. I've been paying $4,200 every month to cover your debts. I advanced over $60,000 from my own company to make sure this week's events didn't fall apart. And that is what you call this family giving me more than enough? The room fell into complete silence. A flicker of annoyance crossed Vivian's face, as if I had just ripped down the velvet curtain hiding their secrets. Charlotte shifted uncomfortably, and Gregory scoffed but said nothing further. Vivian finally dropped the fake sweetness. Her voice was sharp as glass. Money doesn't buy blood, Isabella. You need to remember you're an outsider, and if you choose to be part of this family, you play by our rules. I felt my chest tighten, but at the same time, a rush of heat surged inside me, anger laced with contempt. Rules. Your rules are about using, humiliating, and discarding people. If family is just a dinner table where someone can erase a seat whenever they feel like it, then I'm sorry. I don't need that seat anymore. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low, almost shaking. What are you saying? Are you planning to walk away to tear everything apart? I locked my eyes on his, seeing the fear behind his calm facade. No, Nathan. I'm not tearing anything apart. I'm simply giving back exactly what you all have given me. Rejection. The words hung heavy in the air. Vivian stayed silent for the first time, unable to offer a rebuttal. Charlotte bit her lip. Gregory tugged at his sleeve, and Nathan, he just stood there, wide-eyed, as if realizing something was slipping beyond his control. I turned away and walked toward the elevator. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, marking the birth of a new decision forming in my mind. They thought they had humiliated me. They had no idea what was coming. That night, in the vast hotel room, I lay still, staring at the ceiling. The soft golden light cast delicate patterns on the ornate designs above. But to my eyes, everything had turned into an oppressive darkness. I could hear my heartbeat clearly, each heavy thud sinking me deeper into the mattress. They thought I would cry. They thought I would endure it again, like I had so many times before. But strangely, not a single tear fell. Instead, a slow burning bitterness spread through my chest, quiet yet consuming. What do they see me as? A walking credit card, a bank account with legs? The voice inside my head was sharp, dripping with sarcasm and anger. I had swallowed insult after insult, betrayal after betrayal, holding on to the hope that one day they would truly see me. But the more I endured, the more I became the joke. I remembered every single time I pulled money out to rescue them. This month, $4,200. The next month, another $4,200. I remembered the sleepless nights spent balancing company accounts just to pull together over $60,000 so this grand event wouldn't collapse. And in return, what did they give me? A chair was removed from the table, a mocking smile in the middle of the crowd. There were moments when I wondered if I was the one at fault. Maybe I had put too much faith in a love that couldn't withstand the weight of his family. Or maybe I had been naive to believe that kindness and devotion could buy acceptance. A wave of guilt brushed over me. Guilt for allowing myself to be used for so long. Guilt for pouring my energy, my heart, and my money into people who had never truly seen me as one of their own. But then, from deep inside, another voice rose, steady and unshakable enough. I turned over and sat up. In the mirror, my face looked pale, my eyes shadowed with exhaustion. But there was something different in my reflection now. No more pleading, no more false hope, only resolve. I exhaled slowly, as if releasing 5 years of silence buried inside me. They think I'll swallow this betrayal with a smile. No. This time, I'll be the one writing the script. In my mind, a plan began to form. I had the skills of an event director, knowing every detail and controlling every moving piece. And I had evidence. I had seen the emails and the statements that had slipped out of Nathan's laptop. I knew there were things they were trying desperately to hide. I opened the drawer and pulled out the small notebook I carried everywhere. Blank pages were quickly filled with my handwriting, every payment I had advanced, every delayed repayment, and every sign that the Whitmore empire was cracking. Each jagged line felt like carving a wound into the paper, each number a reminder that this wasn't imagination. This was reality. In the dead of night, I stepped out onto the balcony. The Roman wind was sharp and cold against my skin, but my mind had never been clearer. The Colosseum stood there, towering and silent, reminding me of empires that once ruled the world yet crumbled to dust. If an empire can fall, what is the Whitmore family compared to that? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Fear slowly gave way to something else, a new current of energy, determination. If they wanted to erase me, I would make sure they understood the price of betrayal. I stepped back inside, locked the balcony door, and slipped the notebook into my bag. Tomorrow, I will begin. No more playing the dutiful daughter-in-law. No more silent sacrifices. From now on, I would be the one controlling the stage. The next morning, sunlight filtered into the room through the thick curtains of Rome. I sat at the table, opened my laptop, and my hand trembled slightly. Last night, I had made up my mind. But now was the moment to face the truth. Not just what they had done to me, but also what I had done for them. I scrolled through the files stored on my laptop: bank statements, company invoices, transaction emails. For years, I had been quietly filling the financial gaps for the Whitmore family. I once believed it was helping the family, a duty of a wife, a daughter-in-law. But looking back now, every number became undeniable proof of my foolishness. This month, $4,200 to cover Charlotte's car loan. The month before, another $4,200 for Gregory's overdue credit card. Then, the largest expense, over $60,000. I advanced from the company's credit line to save Vivian's birthday week from collapsing because they couldn't secure the deposit on time. I let out a bitter laugh. I'm not a daughter-in-law. I'm an ATM with a heartbeat. Memories flooded back, sharp and vivid. There was the time the bank called me directly, informing me that Nathan's loan had been overdue for 2 months. I was stunned. He never mentioned anything, yet I wired the money immediately, just to protect my husband's reputation. Another time, I visited the vacation condo in Napa, the place I once thought would be our peaceful weekend escape. But when I opened the door, strangers were living there. They told me they were the new owners, that the property had been transferred to pay off debts. I remember exactly how it felt, like the floor beneath me had collapsed. I looked around that condo, once full of our memories, now belonging to someone else. And all of it happened behind my back, without a single word. And worse, it was Nathan himself who had signed the transfer papers, forging my signature. I closed my laptop and drew in a deep breath. So, they declared war a long time ago. I just refused to open my eyes. The guilt came rushing back, heavy and suffocating like a boulder pressing on my chest. I used to think I was strong, calculated, in control. But the truth was, I had been blind, willingly pouring my money and energy into a bottomless pit. I had helped them rebuild their image of prestige, only for them to use that very image to shut me out. I stepped onto the balcony, gazing down at the bustling streets of Rome. The cool breeze lifted my hair, but it couldn't soothe the ache in my chest. All these years, I've been feeding parasites, believing it would make them value me more. But in the end, all I got in return was public rejection. And in that very moment, I understood my real fear was never about losing money. It was losing my sense of security, losing my place in a family I once called home. I was terrified of being an outsider, of being discarded without a second thought. And last night, that fear had come true. But there was one thing I had never allowed myself to admit: I also had a choice. The choice to stop. The choice to say no. I gripped the cold balcony railing, feeling the icy metal seep into my skin like the determination rising within me. If they think they can keep draining me without consequences, they're wrong. I'm no longer the one carrying their weight. I will turn their greed and lies into the very evidence that destroys them. In my mind, the scattered pieces began falling into place, forming a clear picture. And for the first time in years, I could see my path forward. No running, no tears. This time, it would be retaliation. That afternoon, I sat alone in the corner of the hotel lounge, a steaming cappuccino in front of me, untouched. My mind spun like a complicated blueprint. Every major event needed a script, and right now, so did my life. They declared war when they forged my signature. Now I'm just finishing what they started. That thought echoed in my head, each word clanging like cold metal, sharp and decisive. First, I needed evidence. I opened my laptop and went through every backed-up file. There were screenshots of text messages between Nathan and Vanessa, a draft of the divorce agreement with the pre-signed pages prepared by the Whitmore family's lawyer, and even the property transfer documents for the Napa apartment with my forged signature on them. Each document was like a blade, and I carefully arranged them into an arsenal. I sent everything to Michael Torres, my private attorney, whom I've trusted for years. The message was short: keep these safe. I'll need them soon. Next, I made a list of their weaknesses. For Vivian Jones, it was her reputation. She thrived on the admiration of Boston's elite. One public stain could bring her down faster than any financial blow. For Nathan, his vulnerability lay in his offshore accounts. If exposed, he wouldn't just lose money. He'd face legal investigations. Gregory and Charlotte were different. They depended entirely on the monthly allowances and had no foundation to stand on their own. Then it hit me I didn't need to take them all down at once. I just had to press the right spot, and the entire structure would collapse. In my mind, I saw the Colosseum as a grand arena where the weak were torn apart under the roar of the crowd. But this time, I wouldn't be the prey. I would be the one opening the gates, letting them walk into the battle they created for themselves. I carefully mapped out the timeline. Tomorrow, while they'd be busy with their sightseeing tours, I would meet privately with Marco Romano, the restaurant manager. I knew Marco respected me because I was the one who booked the entire event. With just a few signatures, I could withdraw the guarantees my company had fronted. And just like that, Vivienne's perfect birthday party would turn into a massive debt hanging over their heads. Next, I'd contact Carmen, the manager of the Tuscany villa where the family planned to stay over the weekend. Carmen had once told me she hated dealing with arrogant guests. All I needed to say was, the deposit will no longer come from Whitmore, but from Morgan Events. I knew she would choose me. Once I had the contracts and deposit secured, I would hold the power. They wanted the party. They wanted the trip. Then they would have to beg for it. That night, I wrote a letter by hand. Not to send it, but to remind myself I am no longer the victim. I am the director of this play, and I will end it on my terms. I put the pen down, feeling a strange silence settle inside me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel adrift anymore. I had a purpose, a plan, and weapons to wield. The only question left was, would they realize the game had changed before it was too late? The next morning, Rome seemed brighter than usual. The sky was clear, the cobblestone streets glimmered under the sunlight, and I strolled leisurely down to the familiar cafe across from the hotel. In my hand was a steaming cup of espresso, and right in front of me, the glass reflected the Whitmore family preparing for yet another day of leisure. They laughed and chatted cheerfully as if nothing had happened last night. Vivienne Jones appeared in a turquoise silk dress, her neck weighed down by a heavy pearl necklace. She was still the queen in her own eyes. Nathan clung to his phone, lying to his wife about being busy contacting clients. Charlotte was busy snapping pictures and uploading stories to brag online. The whole arrogant entourage climbed into their private car, heading to a vineyard outside the city. I didn't go. Instead, I sat there sipping my coffee, watching my phone light up with a message from Marco Romano, the restaurant manager, about where the main dinner would be held. Handled as requested. The guarantee under Morgan Events has been withdrawn. They'll need to pay in full before the event begins. A short sentence, but to me, it sounded like the opening note of a symphony. I leaned back in my chair, observing from a distance. The people who once believed they held all the power had no idea they were slowly walking into quicksand. I imagined Vivienne's face when she received the news her extravagant dinner party was no longer covered. In that single moment, the facade of the Boston high society queen would crack wide open. Around the same time, I got another message from Carmen, the manager of the Tuscany villa. Understood. Isabella. We'll cancel the Whitmore booking. The deposit has been transferred back to your company account. I smiled faintly. Another strike. Through the cafe window, I gazed at the Colosseum's ancient bricks and thought about how the Whitmore family empire's downfall wasn't so different from those walls standing strong for centuries, but inevitably crumbling over time. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to slam the table. All I had to do was pull the right bricks. By noon, I deliberately walked through the hotel lobby just as their group returned from the vineyard. Their footsteps were hurried, their voices tinged with tension. I caught Nathan snapping into his phone. "What do you mean we have to pay up front? The contract was already signed," Charlotte whispered to Gregory. "If Mom finds out early, she's going to lose it." I walked past them, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. No one dared meet my eyes. In that moment, I realized something undeniable: the power had shifted. Inside the elevator, I smiled to myself. Now the real party begins. Not the kind of party with fine dining and glittering chandeliers, but the party where the truth finally takes center stage. That evening, I chose a small bar next to the hotel. From my seat by the window, I could see the entrance of the restaurant where they were holding their second dinner. I took a sip of red wine, savoring the moment like an audience member watching a play I had written myself. I didn't need to be inside the banquet hall to picture it clearly. Marco, the manager, stepping forward, his tone polite but firm, demanding immediate payment. Shocked faces, wine glasses frozen mid-air, and panicked whispers rippling through the room. Vivienne's face would surely flush crimson, and Nathan would undoubtedly try to call me for help. I set my glass down and tapped my fingers lightly on the table. Satisfaction spread through me like a slow, warm tide. After all these years of being dismissed, a few phone calls were all it took to tip the scales. I didn't need to scream to prove my worth. They would feel it themselves as they watched their carefully built world collapse. Yet somewhere deep inside, a quiet question echoed. Was this only the beginning, or had I just opened a war I might not escape from the next morning? I woke up not because of the alarm, but because my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The screen lit up with a flood of messages from Nathan. "What did you do? Call me back right now. Mom's furious." And then a long, desperate line. "The accounts are frozen." What the hell did you just do? I sat up, letting the phone buzz in my hand, and a slow smile crept across my face. I had been waiting for this moment. Last night, while they were still busy arguing with the restaurant manager, I sent the entire set of documents to Michael Torres. It only took a few hours for my attorney to forward the evidence to the partner bank in Boston's shady transactions, offshore accounts, even forged signatures. The result: the bank froze every related account until a full investigation could be completed. And now, the phone in my hand was exploding like a chaotic radio transmitter. I opened the family group chat. Whitmore legacy. Messages scrolled endlessly. Charlotte. My credit card just got declined at the store. What's going on, Gregory? The bank just called me. They said they're reviewing suspicious activity. Does anyone know anything about this Vivian? Someone better explain this right now. We're becoming a laughingstock in Rome. I read every line as if I were watching a familiar movie, but with a reversed ending. In the past, I was always the panicked one, scrambling to fix disasters. Today, I was the calm observer, quietly sipping my coffee. Nathan finally called directly. I let him scream through the speaker. "What did you do? Why are all the accounts frozen?" "Do you even understand the consequences?" I replied slowly, each word deliberate and clear. All I did was send them the truth. "Honestly, Nathan, you're the one who created these consequences." There was a pause. Then his voice snapped. "What do you want from me?" "Money," I laughed. "No, Nathan. The fact that you always assume everyone just wants your money is exactly why you can't see what you've really lost." In my mind, I pictured Vivian, the mother-in-law who once sat cross-legged, barking orders like she ruled the world, now frantically calling the bank, her sharp tone useless against reality. I imagined Charlotte running around the boutique with her declined card, her face flushed red with humiliation, and Nathan, for the first time in his life, was facing the reality that his financial power meant nothing once the lies were exposed. The phone kept buzzing, the group chat exploding with panic. I muted the notifications and set the phone face down on the table. In the quiet of the room, I could hear my heartbeat. But this time, it wasn't from pain, it was released. They once treated me like a shadow. They once pushed me out of their dinner table, putting my weakness on display. But now, the tables had turned. They were the ones under the spotlight, stripped bare and spiraling. And one question echoed clearly in my mind. Had they realized yet that this was only the prelude to an even greater collapse that afternoon? The hotel hallway echoed with hurried footsteps. I had just opened my room door when I saw Charlotte and Gregory standing there, their faces pale. "Isabella, we need to talk," Charlotte said, her voice trembling as if she had just swallowed a block of ice. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "Oh, so you finally remembered I exist," Gregory cut in, his tone firm but shaky. "We're a family. If there's a disagreement, we should sit down and talk it through. We can't keep pushing each other to the edge like this." I laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. "Family. When I paid $4,200 every month to cover your debts, you called it a duty. When I fronted over $60,000 for your week-long birthday celebration, you called it an obligation. And last night, when my chair disappeared, your family called it a mistake. Don't you dare use the word family to bargain with me." Charlotte lowered her head, her lips trembling. I didn't realize things were this serious. "If you want, we'll pay you back. I cut her off, my voice sharp as glass. "No, Charlotte, this isn't about the money. The problem is, you all think I'll tolerate this forever." The clicking of heels echoed down the hall, and Vivian Jones appeared. She wore a dove gray suit, her face still composed and elegant, but her eyes betrayed the storm inside. "Isabella," she said, her voice low and controlled, struggling to stay calm. "What do you think you're doing? Do you realize your actions could destroy this entire family?" I looked straight at her, unblinking. "Family? What family?" "Mrs. Jones. A family that schemes to exclude me on my birthday. A family willing to forge my signature to strip me of my assets. You call that a family?" Vivian's hand trembled slightly, but she tightened her grip on the leather bag in her hand. Do you think this revenge will earn you respect? All you're doing is proving that you're petty and ungrateful, just like I said from the beginning." Her words fell heavy, but strangely, I didn't feel the pain anymore. All I felt was emptiness. Ungrateful, I let out a faint, bitter smile. "I've been quietly supporting your entire family for years, and in return, all I've received is humiliation. If that makes me ungrateful, then I'll gladly wear the title." Just then, Nathan appeared. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. His voice was hoarse and broken. "Isabella, please, I'm begging you, stop this. I know I was wrong, but doing this, you're killing us." I froze for a moment. In Nathan's eyes, I caught a flicker of sincerity. Or was it just desperation? I couldn't tell. But then the memory of his laughter the night before, joining in their humiliation of me, came crashing back like a slap to the face. "No, Nathan," I said softly but firmly. "We died the moment you chose their side. Now, there are only consequences left." The room fell into silence. Charlotte turned away, tears streaming down her face. Gregory bit his lip hard, while Vivienne stood frozen, her proud facade cracking for the first time. Nathan lowered his head, his shoulders trembling. I took a deep breath, stepped back into my room, and slammed the door shut. Outside, the hallway erupted in chaos, the shaky anger in Vivienne's voice clashing with Charlotte's bitterness, Nathan's pleading, and Gregory's accusations. A cacophony of guilt, shame, and rage echoed down the corridor, and for the first time, I felt an unfamiliar calm settling deep inside me. The next morning, I decided I would no longer hide in the shadows. It was time for the truth to step into the light. I chose the grand lobby of the hotel, the place where the elite gathered, where no pair of eyes could easily look away. The Whitmore family was already there, sitting stiffly in their tailored clothes, their faces tense but unable to hide the unease beneath. I walked in, holding a folder in my hand. The sound of my heels echoed through the marble floor, pulling every gaze toward me. I stopped, my voice clear and steady. "You want to make this public? Fine. Let's make it public." I opened the folder and pulled out one document after another, making sure everyone around could hear every word. This is the overdue loan statement. This is the offshore transfer receipt. And this, I held the paper high. This is the deed transferring the Napa condo with my forged signature. The entire lobby fell silent, save for the soft murmur of whispers spreading through the crowd. I locked eyes with Vivienne Jones, her face drained of color, her hands trembling as she struggled to maintain a polite smile. For years, I quietly paid off this family's debts, $4,200 every single month, time after time, and more than $60,000 I pulled from the company to save this very birthday party. And in return, they erased my seat right from the middle of the table. Is that what you call family? Charlotte broke down in tears. Gregory lowered his head. Nathan tried to speak, but I stopped him. "Don't. Let me finish. This is my resignation letter, resigning from the role of your so-called anonymous sponsor. I am no longer the personal bank of the Whitmore family, and from this moment on, I am no longer your daughter-in-law." The lobby froze. Other guests stared at them, their eyes filled with a strange mix of pity and curiosity. In that exact moment, I felt the weight lift off my chest. I felt free. I closed the folder and turned to leave. Behind me, Vivienne's voice trembled. "Isabella, You'll regret this. But I didn't stop. Inside me, a silent reply echoed loud and clear. Vivienne, it's you who will regret this. Outside, the Roman breeze brushed softly against my face. For the first time in years, I felt like I could truly breathe. If this story has touched an old wound or stirred your thoughts, share it. Leave a comment and tell me what you would do if you were in my position. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Bitter Scars so you won't miss more real stories, bitter scars, and hidden strength. Because sometimes it's from those very scars that we finally find our freedom. News in the hotel lobby spread faster than I had imagined. Within just a few hours, I heard that the elite American families in Rome were already whispering about the Whitmores and my dramatic public confrontation. There were no more congratulatory smiles, no more admiring glances. Instead, curiosity mixed with disdain. In the private room, I could hear Nathan arguing with his mother. The door was closed, but their voices still spilled out sharp, bitter, and raw. I told you, don't push her. Now the whole world knows Nathan's voice cracked under the weight of his frustration. Vivienne shot back, her voice trembling but still laced with defiance. If you were strong enough, she wouldn't have been able to destroy this family's reputation. This is all your fault for letting her into this house in the first place. Charlotte burst into tears. Gregory blamed Nathan, then turned on their mother, then snapped at his sister again. A vicious cycle of accusations and resentment spiraled endlessly. I sat quietly in the hallway, observing in silence. What I once thought was a powerful, tightly bonded family was nothing more than a fractured mess. People ready to tear each other apart just to avoid facing their own failures. The next day, they canceled every planned activity. No more lavish shopping trips, no more Tuscan wine tastings, no more Amalfi yacht parties. Instead, each of them locked themselves away in their rooms, hunched over their phones, desperately trying to salvage whatever scraps of reputation they had left. I happened to run into Xander Prescott, the fiancé of one of Charlotte's close friends, in the lobby. He looked at me, visibly uncomfortable. After a few moments of silence, Xander let out a quiet sigh. Isabella, I'm sorry for everything that happened. I can't marry into a family like this. I've already spoken to Charlotte. I nodded, not surprised, just sad. Not because Xander was leaving Charlotte, but because the truth was undeniable. Now even outsiders could see this family was falling apart, beyond saving. That night, Nathan came to find me. He knocked on my door for a long time until I finally opened it. He stood there, dark circles under his eyes, his voice unsteady. Isabella, I know there's nothing left to hold on to, but I need to say this. I truly loved you, even if I wasn't brave enough to protect you. I stared at him for a long moment. Standing before me was the man who once swore to shield me from the whole world. Yet he was the first to abandon me when I was humiliated. His late confession could not mend the deep fractures between us. Love without courage, I said slowly, is nothing more than an empty promise. Nathan lowered his head and walked away in silence. As the door closed behind him, I knew with absolute certainty whatever tied me to the Whitmore family was severed. No more dinners, no more titles, no more illusions I once clung to. All that remained was emptiness, but also freedom. I knew there had to be one final confrontation sooner or later. No more hotel lobby walls, no more frantic messages flashing across the screen, just me and them. The confrontation took place in a small conference room in the hotel's basement. Vivienne Jones sat at the center of the table, her back straight, her eyes burning with fire. To her left were Gregory and Charlotte, their faces tired but still holding on to a fragile sense of pride. To her right was Nathan, leaning on his hand, his eyes clouded from sleepless nights. I pulled out the chair slowly, letting the screech against the tiled floor echo through the entire room. Vivienne spoke first, her voice sharp as a blade. "Isabella, you've made enough of a spectacle. What do you want? Speak." I tilted my head slightly, locking my gaze on hers. "What do I want?" "It's simple. I want all of you to admit the truth, that all these years I've been nothing but a tool, a walking wallet, an extra seat at the table you were more than willing to discard." Nathan shifted in his seat, about to speak, but I raised my hand to stop him. "No, Nathan. You had your chance to speak, and you chose silence. Today, it's my turn." Gregory shot up from his chair, his voice trembling with anger. "You have no idea how big this is. Once the news spreads, the reputation, the business, everything will collapse. You'll lose everything too." I met his glare, my voice cold and steady. "Wrong. I have my own company, my own career. I built it from nothing, and I can build again any time I need to. But you've been clinging to the rotting name of Whitmore." Charlotte burst into tears, whispering through shaky breaths. "We used to be sisters, Isabella." I turned to her, my throat tight but my voice unwavering. "Sisters don't erase each other's place at the table. Sisters don't forge signatures to steal someone's assets." The room fell into a heavy silence. Finally, Vivienne rose to her feet, her hand pressing against the table, each word falling like a hammer striking steel. "You think you've won. You'll walk away alone, without anyone by your side, without love, without family. All you'll have left is emptiness." I stood up too, my heart pounding, but my voice was steady and firm. "I'm tired of pretending we're a loving family. The only emptiness here is the fake affection you've been wearing like a mask. And me? I don't need it anymore." Nathan lowered his head, his fists clenched, but he didn't say a word. Maybe, in that moment, he understood everything was over. I walked out and slammed the door behind me, and right then, in that exact second, I knew I had just cut the very last thread. I left the meeting room with slightly trembling hands, but it wasn't out of fear. It was the aftershock of a storm that had passed, leaving behind a strange calm inside me. The hotel hallway stretched endlessly, bathed in soft golden light reflecting off the polished marble floor. The sound of my heels echoed steadily, like a drumbeat affirming one simple truth: I am still here. I am still whole. And more importantly, I am free. For years, I allowed myself to be defined by the gazes and judgments of the Whitmore family. I waited for a nod of approval from Vivienne Jones, longed for a smile of recognition from Nathan, and hoped for a sliver of goodwill from Charlotte and Gregory. I lied to myself, believing that if I kept sacrificing and staying silent, I would eventually be accepted. But last night, in the heart of dazzling Rome, as I stood in the hotel lobby and laid every truth bare, I finally realized something I never needed their validation to exist. My worth was never tied to the Whitmore name, never bound by their reputation or the glittering walls they built around themselves. My worth lies within me, the woman who built a company from nothing, who weathered financial storms without collapsing, who endured, and who rose stronger than before. I stepped out onto the high balcony, inhaling deeply as the cool breeze carried the scent of orange blossoms from the garden below. For the first time in years, the silence surrounding me no longer felt threatening. It felt peaceful. It felt mine. I thought about all those long nights spent drafting event plans, the moment I signed my first big contract, and the smile of a client seeing their dream brought to life. Every single one of those moments was proof that I was strong enough, skilled enough, worthy enough with or without the Whitmore name beside me. A part of me still felt a quiet ache. I once loved Nathan. I once believed we could build a life together. But love cannot survive in silence and betrayal. I no longer see myself as weak because of that. I see myself as clear-eyed. My phone buzzed with a new message. Michael Torres wrote Isabella. All the documents have been securely stored. If they try to counter-sue, we have everything we need to protect you. I placed the phone down on the table, a sense of calm rising within me. I wasn't alone. I had never truly been alone. I had simply been caught in the false belief that love and acceptance had to come from one predetermined family. Now I know sometimes. Family is the people who choose to stand by you, the ones who believe in you and respect you. I sat quietly on the balcony, watching Rome glow under the setting sun. The crimson hues painted across the sky felt like a marker of the end of an old chapter and the beginning of a new one. For the first time in years, I whispered to myself, I am enough. I have never been missing anything except the faith to believe in myself. Just a few days after the incident in Rome, the ripple effect began to show. I didn't have to say another word, yet the story spread on its own. Boston's social news ran a cryptic headline about the Whitmore investment family facing financial troubles. People who once treated Vivian Jones like a queen of philanthropy now whispered behind her back. A few sponsors even removed the Whitmore name from their honor boards, citing the need to reassess credibility. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop ringing, but not from them. The calls came from other people who had once sat at the same tables, who had witnessed the way I was pushed aside. An older woman emailed me, writing that she had gone through the same thing when her husband's family belittled her for coming from an ordinary background. A young entrepreneur texted me, saying my actions had given her the courage to walk away from a toxic business partnership. I read every word, my throat tightening. I had never imagined that speaking my truth could open doors for others. But it was true, my pain was no longer just a private scar. It had become a mirror for those silently enduring their own struggles. One morning, I received an invitation to speak at a small conference in San Francisco. The topic, the power of setting boundaries in relationships. I laughed when I read it. Who would have thought that an event sparked by a missing chair would lead to a stage and a microphone standing before a packed room? I shared my story. I once believed my worth depended on other people's approval. I was terrified that if I walked away from the table, I would have nothing left. But the truth was the opposite. The moment I stood up, I reclaimed myself. And from there, I had everything. The room erupted in applause. In the eyes of some, I even saw tears. That evening, I opened my laptop and wrote in my journal, perhaps the most painful part of this journey wasn't their betrayal. It was that I had allowed myself to believe I wasn't enough. But now, through those cracks, the light has come in, and if I can rise from this, so can others. I won't deny it. Deep down, There are wounds that still haven't fully healed, but they're no longer weaknesses. They've become reminders. That trust can be broken, yes, but the strength within me can never be taken away. When I look in the mirror now, I see a woman who has endured humiliation, loneliness, and exclusion, but still stands tall. And more importantly, I see that I am no longer alone. The messages I receive each day are proof that personal pain can transform into collective strength. That night, I found myself quietly wondering, could it be that what I've done is only the opening act for an even bigger confrontation, not just with the Whitmore family, but with the systems that have long treated women like chairs that can be moved at will? What began with a single chair being erased from the dinner table eventually ended up in a courtroom in Boston. News about the offshore accounts and forged documents had drawn the attention of the Securities and Exchange Commission. What started as whispers among the elite had escalated into an official investigation. I sat in the section reserved for involved parties, my hand gripping a pen tightly. In front of me was the Whitmore family's team of attorneys, their faces stern, their tones carefully composed, but I could clearly see the panic in their eyes. Vivian Jones appeared in a dark suit, stripped of her usual glamorous jewelry and the haughty smile she once carried. She sat upright, but her shoulders trembled slightly each time the prosecutor presented a new piece of evidence. Gregory and Charlotte were there as well, silent, avoiding everyone's gaze. Nathan, the man who used to be my husband, sat in the front row, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead, his fingers tapping restlessly on the chair as if trying to shake off his fear. Attorney Michael Torres rose to his feet, his voice resonating through the courtroom. Your Honor, here is the evidence of property being transferred using forged signatures. This statement shows that more than $60,000 were illegally withdrawn from my client's company to fund events for the Whitmore family. And here he held up a copy of the contract high, his undeniable proof of systematic fraud. Each word he delivered landed like a hammer blow. I turned to look at the Whitmore side. Vivian bit her lip hard. Gregory lowered his head, and Charlotte's eyes glistened with tears. Nathan tried to maintain composure, but his fingers shook violently. When the judge read the summary, the room fell into complete silence. After reviewing the evidence, the court concludes the Whitmore family engaged in financial misconduct and forged signatures. The related accounts will remain frozen. Individuals responsible will be placed under federal investigation. The gavel struck. Sharp. Final. Unyielding. I exhaled. Not out of satisfaction, but relief. Justice would not return to me the years I had lost, but at the very least, it had exposed the truth. As I stepped out of the courtroom, I saw Nathan slowly approach me. He opened his mouth. His voice hoarse, Isabella. I'm sorry. I never thought it would go this far. I looked at him for a long moment before replying calmly, No. Nathan, you did think so. You just chose to close your eyes. He lowered his head without another word. Vivian swept past us, her gaze still carrying a trace of pride, but beneath it was a panic she couldn't hide. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around, cameras flashing relentlessly. I walked through the chaos without covering my face, without lowering my head. For the first time, I was no longer afraid of being seen. I didn't defeat them for revenge. I won to remind myself of one thing: my worth had never depended on the recognition of any family. I left the courthouse that day with a strange feeling, not a triumphant sense of victory, but a deep, quiet stillness within my heart. The sound of the judge's gavel still echoed in my ears, sharp and final, yet to me, it felt more like the ringing of a bell announcing the beginning of an entirely new life. Back in San Francisco, my small apartment suddenly felt like a sanctuary. The morning light slipped through the window, casting warm golden streaks across the white walls. I sat down on my wooden chair, cradling a cup of tea, and let the calm wash over me. There were no more urgent emails from my ex-husband's family, no more judgmental stares from Vivian Jones, and no more painful silences from Nathan. It was just me and the sweetness of stillness. I looked around the space I had built with my own hands. A few paintings I had picked up on business trips, my old but sturdy desk, and a bookshelf overflowing with the novels I loved. Everything here was mine, untouched by the shadow of the Whitmore name, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Work at Radiance Events began to flourish more than ever before. New clients reached out, saying they saw strength in me after the scandal. Some even told me they wanted someone who could remain steady in the midst of chaos, and they trusted me to be that person. I smiled, realizing that in the end, my scars had become the very marks that drew people toward me. Occasionally, news about the Whitmore family still found its way to me. Gregory had sold off assets to pay mounting debts. Charlotte had vanished from the social scene altogether. Vivian had withdrawn from charity circles, her once glittering reputation slowly fading into obscurity. And Nathan? He slipped out of my life like a shadow. I didn't search for him, and I didn't need to know. I no longer carried hatred. I didn't need an apology either. I had learned that forgiveness isn't about giving them peace, it's about freeing myself from the weight of carrying them any longer. One afternoon, I stood on the rooftop of my office building. The city stretched endlessly below, the streams of traffic glowing beneath the orange hue of sunset. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, "Some bridges are meant to burn. Not to destroy, but to make sure there's no way back. And from the ashes, we finally find the courage to walk our own path." I opened my eyes, letting the wind whip through my hair. For the first time, I felt truly free. This is my story from the day a single chair was erased from a dinner table to the day I walked away from a family that once seemed untouchable. I lost so much along the way: my trust, my love, and years of sacrifice. But I gained something far greater. I found myself. Scars remain, but they are proof that we've lived, that we've fought, and that we've overcome. And if this story resonates with you, remember this: you never have to accept sitting in a chair someone else has labeled unnecessary. You have the right to rise, to walk away, and to build your own table. If my story speaks to you, please share it, leave a comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Bitter Scars, because here, every scar carries a story worth hearing.